Isn't there a children's book about an elephant named Babar?
I don't know. I don't have any.
No children?
No elephant books.
Hey everybody, welcome to CinemaGulp here on YouTube for our Fletch series retrospective. I'm joined here with Scotty R37 of the Phantasmagorium Show and Hump Day Happy Hour. Hey Scotty.
Hey, what's going on?
Well, this is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. We're finally doing it, and it's all been my fault as to why we haven't done it yet, but I'm glad we are doing it. There's a lot to unpack, you know. I'm a fan of the book series with Gregory McDonald. The first film's one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's my favorite Chevy Chase character. I'll just tell you, like, my brief kind of history with the Fletch series is obviously goes back to the first Fletch movie. I was a kid, so I hadn't read the books or even heard of the book series, but I loved the movie as a kid. And it really wasn't until, and you know, then I saw Fletch 2, chomping at the bit to see that. I'm sorry, Fletch Lives, when that came out. And then it wasn't until I was in the military and I was leaving for a tour of duty where I bought up as many Fletch books as I could because you need things to read. You know, this was like early, no smartphones and all that kind of stuff. So I remember I got Fletch 1 because I had heard it was a prequel. I got Fletch 2. I got Fletch's Fortune, which is my favorite Fletch book. I got Fletch and the Widow Bradley, and I think that's all. And the original Fletch book. And I didn't know what order they were supposed to go in because I couldn't just go on any YouTube page and find out. Yeah, I just became a fan of the series, and I wish, and we'll get into it, but I had wished that it could have stayed a franchise for much longer and not lay dormant until 2022 with people, you know, like Jason Lee, who was at one point mentioned to play Fletch, who I think would have been fantastic.
There were rumors that Joshua Jackson was going to be at one point.
That could have worked. But yeah, what about yourself as far as your history with Fletch?
I think I saw it first on VHS. I might have had chicken pox or something. When did Fletch 1 come out? 85?
85.
Yeah, it was love at first sight. I was a Bill Murray fan at that point as well. Like, I was starting to become aware of comedians just by the movies that they were in. So I knew Bill Murray from Ghostbusters, Chevy Chase. This was, oh my stars, who is this? Because I wasn't watching Saturday Night Live. And I fell in love with it. Got the book like immediately or like shortly thereafter. Or maybe it was later. It doesn't matter. I'm telling a story like my mom. And I eventually got the book, and it wasn't for me because it wasn't like the Chevy Chase movie, so I never really revisited them.
Well, let's get into Fletch from 1985.
Yes.
Directed by Michael Ritchie, who also did Fletch Lives. Good director. I've always liked some of his stuff. I'm a big fan of The Golden Child, even though it was kind of considered a bomb for Eddie Murphy. That was his follow-up to Fletch. Back in the 70s, he did Bad News Bears. Pretty good comedic director, I would say. Perfect for this movie.
Absolutely. And I think he went on and directed Chevy Chase again in Cops and Robertsons. I'm not joking, sir.
We'll leave that one out of the equation. No, I'm sure you're correct. But yeah, that less said about Cops and Robertsons, the better. Jack Palance, huh?
I know.
Yeah, that was truly when Chevy Chase said, I don't care about being funny anymore.
Well, and we'll talk about Chevy Chase through the progression of this, because I think that one of the things that happened with Chevy Chase after the Fletch movies and why we didn't get like a third Fletch movie, I didn't even look at the box office, but there were parts where Chevy Chase stopped kissing actresses in movies because he didn't want his children to see him kissing actresses while he was married to their mom. And so it was a thing that sort of hampered his career.
But he also didn't want to play the character anymore, I believe. He flip-flopped a lot on that. Like, he did, and then he didn't. Yeah, and he had aged out even by that 89 one. He was already starting to kind of look a little different, you know?
Yeah, it would be weird if you had Chevy Chase, like, from Vegas Vacation.
Yeah, like
that
Chevy
Chase is...
Yeah, like gray-haired Chevy Chase. Just keep the Laker hat on, yeah. Fletch 1, we'll just call it Fletch. Fletch 1 is an actual book.
Yes.
And it's the prequel book written many years after Fletch, but Erwin M. Fletcher, I. M. Fletcher, is an investigative journalist, and when you find him in the movie and in the book, very similar. The movie and the book are very similar as far as story structure, with a couple key things. Well, because you've read the book too.
Yes.
A lot of things, not everything ends up in the exact way, because book form, it's easier to solve one thing and then go to another thing, where the movie wants to have it all happen at one place at one time for cinematic reasons or whatever. But he's investigating this drug trade on the beach. I want to say it's Venice Beach. Yeah. Then he gets approached by Tim Matheson.
Mine's bigger than that.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, my cucumber. It's bigger.
Who says, I'll give you $1,000 if you come to my house. And Chevy Chase says some really funny shit in response to that. And then when he gets to his house, he asks him to kill him.
But also, it is interesting because we're introduced to Fletch as an investigative reporter. We get a narration, and we get our first sort of satellite of characters, because Fletch keeps bouncing back and forth. Part of the fun with this is seeing Chevy Chase interact with all walks of life, and I think it's a staple of the character in the films. I don't know how much more of that occurs. He kind of just aggressively stomps his way in a sarcastic way, but he is like, if you say Frank was more angry in the book, so is Fletch.
Yeah, well, Fletch is not Chevy Chase in the books.
Right.
And that's a welcome addition. I actually think the movies don't work without, and we'll get into that when we get into Confess Fletch. They don't work without Chevy injecting that into the story, because otherwise you're just watching sort of an unlikable person try to investigate something that's really not all that interesting of an investigation. So the character has so much to do with that. And you got to give Chevy Chase so much credit for injecting his humor into it. Because you're right, like, we meet all these characters so early on, all these different parts of what Fletch is doing with his life. The people on the beach, he knows how to juggle all this stuff so well. In the books, not so much. Like, he forgets things that are going on in the books. He's left out of things and forgets all about certain things. The movies with Chevy Chase, he really knows how to juggle things and keep everything in his head on what's going on, with the exception of a couple of things where he fumbles because he has to improvise, which is some of the funniest stuff in the movie for sure.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And those sort of
Dr. Rosen.
Dr. Rosen.
Oh, it's me, Dr. Rosenpenis. I'm just here to check out Stanwick's file. Dr. Rosen, I'm here to get to the records room. It's Dr. Rosen.
Yeah, all of those little bits and sketches. Like after rewatching the first two Fletches, but Fletch specifically, it is a more cohesive sort of string of sketches, and it's held together by Harold Faltermeyer's music. The music and the editing, and it's just like, where he's going based on the last thing that he picked up and looked at and commented on or made a joke about. And then we don't need to have a car ride. But then in the middle of the movie, we have a big car ride.
My name is Erwin Fletcher. I'm an investigative reporter for a Los Angeles paper. You probably read my stuff under the byline of Jane Doe.
So much what's missing from 2022 is Harold Faltermeyer's theme. It's so iconic. I had that as my ringtone on my phones for years and years and years. Like, I just love it. And, we didn't even mention yet, and we'll get into it bit by bit.
What's your name?
Fletch. I want you to murder me.
I love how it opens up with just like those 80s movies, just a full song of credits, with black screen and credits. It's great. But it really sets the mood really well. And the other two don't really have that. Who is it?
Stephanie Mills.
Okay. Stephanie Mills. It's a great song. But Harold Faltermeyer's theme throughout the movie is just so well placed, like you said, Scotty. It's like the editing, the narrative that's going on from Chevy Chase, the spoken narrative, and then the music. It puts you in those moments where he's, looking over fences and investigating somebody's like house and looking through the drawers for clues. It just plays the music so perfectly and smooth.
And I would put it up there with Axel F. Because if I'm not mistaken, Harold Faltermeyer did compose Axel F as well.
He did. Yeah, he did. He was one of the best.
Yeah, so that is definitely something that is missing from Confess Fletch, but definitely something that drives Fletch. It's amazing, and it does. Part of the reason that I like this movie is because of the narration, and it does remind me a bit of a film noir, and I think that really helps because you do have almost a powerless protagonist, and he doesn't care. It's like watching Bugs Bunny solve crimes. It's so good.
The books are 100% noir, completely. I mean, with jokes in them, and sometimes the investigations are a little silly and hijinks and stuff happen. But you're right. He is like Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China, where he's the protagonist, he's the catalyst, and he's the one who's doing all the investigating. But he's not always the one that puts everything together by the end. He fumbles his way into the answers.
Absolutely, and the way that he gets out of any jam, it's like. And there's still a level of vulnerability in Chevy Chase's performance.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like he does get that, like, uh-oh, this might not work.
When he's in the jail cell, he puts on the serious face. He's scared.
Oh, yeah. Like Joe Don Baker.
Baker's a scary dude.
He's a what?
He's a scary dude.
He is. Oh, absolutely he is.
Dipshit. You go back to that goddamn beast and you won't live to regret it. Right.
You may know him from 3 James Bond movies. He played a villain once and an ally twice. He was Walking Tall, Sheriff Buford Busser. Yeah, no, he's been in everything.
Dana Wheeler Nicholson was just beautiful in that movie, man. I had such a crush on her. She just had a smile and a voice, and
she was also in Tombstone.
Yeah, she was in a bunch of stuff. But yeah, Tombstone was one of the last things I think I saw her in. They do a good job setting up Fletch's workplace and colleagues in the movie, which makes it more enjoyable than the books. Because in the books, he's mostly calling in, and he doesn't really have a relationship that much. There is no Larry, unfortunately, in the books. It's just a mashup of different people that he goes to. So much of the book is him on the phone investigating, and you can't do that in the movie. You have to have him going to places in order to make it cinematic.
Absolutely, and I think that may be part of the reason why I was sort of nonplussed by the book at the time. I probably would have to mature a little bit more and have a little bit more reverence for the source material. But as far as the movie goes, with the music, the editing, the cast, like who else we got here? We got the Dr. Dolan. I didn't know what a prostate exam was.
100%. Moon River.
Funniest scenes I've ever seen in my life when I was a kid, man.
Using the whole fist, Doc?
And Emmett Walsh oh God, he was so great at that kind of character. He just had that lovable goofiness about him.
I don't find anything wrong with you.
Huh. Well, sure it's not for a lack of looking.
But it would just that entire him going into the storage room, into the records room, and trying to finagle everything.
Can you tell me where the records room is? Where's the records room? He just keeps saying, "Where's the records room?
Where's the records room? Can you collate this?"
I want to check the records room. Dr. Rosen, where's the record room?
Next to pathology.
Would you do me a favor and take care of these things? What the hell is happening? Where the hell's the records room?
George Wendt is Fat Sam. Like George Wendt. Like I want to say this was the second season of Cheers at the time. Right, I want to say right around there. So people obviously knew who he was, but plays a totally different character. He's a great character. He's a small, minor character, but Fat Sam's awesome.
Well, and I don't know the guy who played Gummy. I feel like I should know who played Gummy because he was in everything as well.
Yeah, who was that guy? I've seen that guy's face in a million things.
Yeah.
It says here his name is Larry Flash Jenkins. Oh, Larry Jenkins. Larry Flash Jenkins. Okay, I know who that is. Yeah. He was in a lot of stuff in the 80s. He had those squinty eyes.
Well, but he kind of played this character. Richard Libertini, who plays Frank. I've seen him in a million things.
Oh, yeah. He's been around forever. He's always fantastic in everything. I want to say this is the first time I ever saw Gina Davis in anything.
Yeah.
It was definitely one of her earlier roles. At the time, I didn't realize if it was going to be some sort of love interest. I'm glad it wasn't. She's just like kind of all three of these movies have sort of a built-in, for movie purposes, character that's there to like kind of feed Fletch information or get in his way on something that wasn't in the book, but it's needed, and I appreciate that. I'm usually fine when you add things. It's when you take things out that it makes it more noticeable.
Gina Davis is a delight here. I think that she's fantastic as the bubbly sidekick.
Dude, she's not in the book, and yet you and I quote her. Our biggest movie quote in this film is,
I love your body, Larry.
Yeah,
love your body, Larry.
that's how you can tell if you are Fletch friends, is if you are okay with telling each other.
I love your body, Larry.
Okay, so this movie needing Chevy Chase's humor in order to give it a purpose to exist, really, because that was kind of my problem with this newer one, was that because it didn't do what Chevy Chase did with the character, I almost wondered, why was it made? Because Fletch books on their own are intriguing and they're fun to follow because you're following the clues, you're reading the book, and you're imagining it playing out in your head the way you see it. Once you let Chevy Chase take control of that and make it his own thing, it just makes it more interesting and makes it more fun to follow. His little hijinks and his run-ins with the cops, all the stuff he does to get information, and the different characters he plays.
I'm gonna need some pliers and a set of 30-weight ball bearings.
John Cocktoe, Stone.
No, I'm sorry, who are you again?
I'm Frida's boss.
Who's Frida?
My secretary.
Let's say in the 80s you put, like, I don't know, Mel Gibson in that role or something. Because it's not an action movie, it would just be kind of stale. It really did take Chevy Chase, get to know Gregory McDonald, and say, like, I envisioned the guy like this. I think the story progresses funner and faster and more entertaining with him like this. And Chevy Chase is a known asshole. He wasn't going to do it unless he can kind of make it a Chevy Chase movie, and I think it's better for that.
I also separate the legend of Chevy Chase from when I'm watching Chevy Chase. I understand that it was very difficult. I understand that he's a bit of an asshole. But he's not being a jerk to me when I'm watching Fletch.
No,
he's being a jerk to everybody else.
He was to me like the most versatile of the comedic actors, where he could play the suave. I mean, a lot of people say he's just playing the same guy every time. I disagree. Fletch is nothing like Clark Griswold. Nothing. Fletch is confident, 2 steps ahead, but also sort of 1 step behind on other things. Griswold's just a bumbling moron. One of the reasons I always thought Jason Lee would have been a good fit is because he reminded me a lot of the Chevy Chase humor, a lot.
And they were going to do Fletch 1.
I know. And he was the perfect age to do Fletch 1 when that was getting, like, 2003, I think it was, or something like that. Fletch 1's a good book. I implore people to read it if you like any of the Fletch books and you haven't seen it. It's an interesting book. Most of the Fletch stories, there's 2 different situations going on. One that Fletch is doing at the start of the story, and another one that presents itself during the beginning of the story. You have the drug trade, beachcombing thing, and then you have this Kavanaugh thing come up. So when you meet these disgruntled detectives, and they threaten Fletch's life, they don't threaten his life in the book, but they rough him up, but they don't threaten to kill him like they do in the movie. But again, it makes the movie better. It makes the movie better that there's stakes like that, like we'll kill you. And you realize that's part of the drug trade. Like, he's getting in the way because they're about to blow this whole thing wide open.
Yeah, but it is. These are 2 intersecting plots, which are usually a little difficult to knit sometimes. But because we're following Fletch and it looks like it's 2 different stories, just like every good noir, at the end it all ties into one. Presents itself fairly easy to follow. Like, I had to watch it a couple times to figure it out. But again, this is something that I saw in, like, 1986. But I love watching it because I'm like, okay, that's why that. Like, there's even a moment in this when he goes to Utah to Sally Ann Kavanaugh's house. He walks in and he smokes a cigarette. And I'm like, this is the first time Fletch has smoked at all. And I'm like, why did he do that? Very 80s is what I said this time when I rewatched it. And then I realized, no, we had to establish that Fletch had a lighter so that at the end, when Joe Don Baker shows up, we can turn on the gas and throw a lighter and explode him.
Exactly. Yeah.
But set up and payoff. It's great.
This is one of the most simplistic stories out of the Fletch books. Probably because it's not chronologically the first Fletch story, but it's the first book from 1974. Very easy to follow. It's an 80s caper comedy with Chevy Chase. They don't want to make it too complicated. Adding that monologue, that narrative, helps progress what's going on too. Which is great. Makes it feel like the book is coming out when he's talking to us.
That is also something to take into account when watching this, because it is a caper of sorts. Like it's solving crimes. Is you also have to put yourself in the shoes of people in 1985 who didn't have cell phones or computers. They make a joke at one point in Fletch Lives, and it's like, now all I need is a computer and a 10-year-old to teach me how to use it. Yeah. And like there are some dated references in here. I don't know, your mileage may vary based on your age, but born in the 70s, this kind of ruled. Again, I was into Mad Magazine and Cracked Magazine, and I had grown up on Bugs Bunny, and it was like the coolest guy in the room, solving crimes, doing stuff. Captain Kirk, all these things, and Chevy Chase. Fletch was right there, and it was great. It was,
I loved any show or movie where it was about a private investigator. I loved it. I wanted to be a private investigator. I wanted to have an office and a camera and a telescope and a voice recorder. And I think even though this movie's 85, there's very few movies from the 80s that feel sort of timeless. This one's one of them. You can take the theme music from Faltermeyer out of the equation as far as that goes, because nowadays they're retrofitting in soundtracks like that in movies, that are very synth related and almost sound 80s on purpose. So you can take that however you want, but life is very different, obviously, but everyone still acts and talks basically the same. Yes. Humor is still a very universal, similar thing through time. And like even though a lot of the jokes will be different, the shenanigans and the hijinks of Chevy Chase just being in a doctor's office about to get a prostate exam, it's just as funny now as it was then, I'm sure there's things that are different. This movie doesn't have a whole lot of fashion in the 80s. It doesn't really show a lot of like pop culture stuff, which is a bonus, that keeps it from being super dated.
Well, even the one kid with the braces didn't look like an 8.
Oh, he's so great.
He was great. What about James Avery as one of the cops, the voice of Shredder and Uncle Phil?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was in a little bit part of it. Yeah, Uncle Phil, man.
Pardon me. Hey, look, Uncle Phil, no disrespect, man, but you got to watch where you parking that thing.
He was also the DMV driver and License to Drive. He was a fun character actor in the 80s.
You're in luck, Anderson. The cup was empty.
R.I.P.
James Avery.
Well, let's not forget one of the other returning characters that is in Fletch that shows up in Fletch Lives, and that's George Weiner.
Yes.
Who plays the kind of goofy lawyer to one of Fletch's ex-wives, trying to collect alimony. And I love so much his introduction in the movie. He just knew Fletch was going to go up the fire escape, and he's like, "Is it breaking and entering?" He's like, "Well, I'm just standing here."
Cash. I'm impressed. Saw my pimp today.
And when you finally get a glimpse into Fletch's apartment, you see like how he lives. He's kind of a slob, and this movie, in some of the later books or stories or whatever, he becomes sort of a floater where he's just kind of drifting around from living in different countries and different states and stuff like that. But this one, he's established, officially an LA guy,
Speaking of his obsession with basketball, specifically the Lakers, what kind of a dream sequence was that? I think it was absolutely funny for me at the time.
Dream, yeah.
It wasn't blackface. It just a guy in an afro.
It wouldn't be funny if it was blackface. It's funnier that he has the afro because he already has the height. Fletch comes in at 6'5" with the afro 6'9".
It's so good.
Shoes, Jim. Oh god damn, I love that scene. And Kareem
gets the tough rebounds, does the tough things that we need to win. It's great working with him. I don't know where we'd be without him.
Well, let's take a look.
Well, and there was a deleted scene because remember when he's in jail, he says, or he's in the chief Carlin's office and he says, "Is that Tommy Lasorda? I hate Tommy Lasorda." There was supposed to be another dream sequence with him pitching and then Lasorda for the LA Dodgers, and then Lasorda coming out and pulling him from the mound. And
they shoot it?
There are production stills of it, but there is no footage.
I love that scene where he's like, "I hate Tommy Lasorda."
Hey, you and Tommy Lasorda. I hate Tommy Lasorda.
That is more of like the real Fletch coming out a little bit, you know?
Well, and again, it is followed by the most dramatic scene when Carlin has a gun to Fletch's head, and he's like he dropped, and it's like he's not kidding. He is not kidding.
He's basically telling him like, if like there's nothing you could do about this right now. I got all these cops in this room. No one would ever know. You know, like you have no power. You know.
Once you see Chevy or Fletch just drop the facade completely and be like, "Okay, I'm gonna die if I don't," and he says he don't. He lied, but that's Fletch.
No, and that's where you have to move the stakes up a little bit, and I think they made a good decision having Chief Carlin threaten his life. My favorite like segment of this movie, and it's the one that you and I quote the most, and it's at the tennis club. I can't do this retrospective without talking about everything that happened at the tennis club. Charge it to the Underhills. I'll have a steak sandwich and a steak sandwich. Oh, and I'm guessing you want a tip, don't you? And he's like,
maybe next time.
You, senor. And he goes, maybe next time. What a fucking asshole.
I think that Chevy Chase construct everything that he has with Gail Stanwyck. I think I adore the most, simply because that was one of the ways that I was like, oh, so you just lie to women.
Well, you can lie, but his charm is what.
Yeah, can I borrow your towel? My car just hit a water buffalo.
I just got out of the shower.
Yeah. Can I borrow your towel for a sec? My car just hit a water buffalo.
But it's those little moments of having to come up with something immediately and then coming up with the worst thing ever. And same goes with Rosen. I enjoy the tennis interaction, and I enjoy the questioning, quite literally a pumping of information. I think it was really charming, and that it was towards, again, it was permission to screw with the Underhills, because the Underhills were jerks anyway.
You're like, Mrs. Stanwyck. Those guys
just pounding
on the door.
And it's great because while that's happening, and it's kind of a perfect built comedic scene, is because the consequences of what Fletch has done have followed him to his investigation of Gail Stanwyck. He can get out of that situation because it's like, here's what's going on. Tells her basically the truth. And then she's like, okay, fine, cool, whatever.
And then she just grabs the bill from the Underhills and like, okay, don't worry, I'll take care of it.
That's one of the best punchlines ever. And I think that Fletch ruined me for modern comedies, sort of like those Ben Stiller comedies or things like that. I find it so much funnier when something is building and building and building, and then it's just immediately, it's fine.
Yeah.
I like it, not the long-lasting, guilt-ridden tension that we have to carry on to the next situation. Oh, did you see what happened last time? Fletch doesn't care, and Mrs. Stanwyck can pay for it.
Yeah.
So go away, Mr. Underhill.
Wonder what like a younger, early 2000s Vince Vaughn could have done with this role. Do you think that?
Oh, yeah.
He's got the same kind of quick, fast jokes and suave. He might be a little too tall, but Fletch was tall, you know. Fletch was a tall guy in the books and in the movies. Yeah, he might have been interesting when he was, a little bit younger. But yeah, there's a lot of people you could throw in that role, and maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't.
But like
Kevin
even
will always be the goat. I'm not exactly sure why they didn't, because Confess Fletch chronologically comes after Fletch. So I don't know why they didn't make that the second Chevy Chase movie. It doesn't matter. I'm sure there's reasons. Maybe Chevy Chase kind of took control of the production and said, I just want to make a story from scratch. But again, Gregory McDonald was involved in the writing for it. So I'm not really sure why. But I think Fletch would have been a good Chevy Chase follow-up movie because he could have added a lot to it that is missing, from the 2022 one. But
when was Confess Fletch the novel written?
I think it was 76.
Oh crap!
Yeah, 76.
Plenty of time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It was the second book that he wrote in the series. Let's get to the climax of Fletch.
This is where it all ties together. So he goes to Alan Stanwyck's, and everything is supposed to be set up the way that it's supposed to be set up. You got keys in the glove box of the Jaguar, and then he checks the trunk, and the trunk is full of gasoline. So he knows that something bad's going to happen when he takes the Jaguar, which was part of the payment for murdering Alan Stanwyck. And so he goes into the house. He sees everything where it's supposed to be. There's a bunch of money, actually much more money than there was supposed to be. The safe is open as requested, but he goes and he checks. And he's like, this is not what... And so he goes to check and find where the gun is after taking a sort of a casing of the of the library where we were introduced to the fabulous wealth of Mr. Stanwyck, and there's Alan, and he's just dressed up like Fletch, Lakers hat, Lakers shirt, hoodie, and a blazer, of course, and so he's gonna kill Fletch, dump him in the car, roll him off a cliff, burn him up. Part of the reason why he has to go and fake his own death is because he said he was going to buy land in Utah for his parents, but he actually just bought $3,000 worth of useless nothing land, but he had said it was going to be a major investment of, survey says, $3 million. We've got the money laundered. I'm assuming that's where the heroin comes in. That's why Alan Stanwyck and Chief Carlin are working together. It is kind of like piecing together the end of Clue, and it just sparks my mind. I love it. It's dopamine. Chief Carlin shoots Alan Stanwyck. In the moment of the film, when you watch it and they explain it, and the way it's performed, you're like, this all makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
But then if you think it's a Chevy Chase comedy that's kind of kick-ass, but when you come down to it, I don't need an abacus. I just had a good time watching it. Maybe the book fills it out better. Maybe I didn't really remember the book.
I think the movie fills it out better. It makes it easier to understand. I actually think the movies, for the most part, do a better job of keeping the audience up with what's happening. The greatest thing is, what is it? It's George Wendt and the other guys from the beach are the ones that put everybody away.
Yes.
Because they were like the informants or whatever. And I thought that was kind of a cool.
Yeah, it turned out the Gummy was the one who was feeding the
Gummy.
Fat Sam. He was being blackmailed by the chief, and he wouldn't get any money. He only got free junk, just free junk. It is like it's there. It will make you laugh with the performance. I think that Chevy Chase's brilliance in it. I think that the car chase in it is second only to the Blues Brothers for like a comedy of that era.
Yeah, it plays a music track over it instead of like some action music, it's very similar to Bit by Bit, it's just like another one.
Get out of town.
Get out of town. Yeah, oh, I love that song, dude. I love that. Yeah. Well, remember he goes into, it was like the the Rotary Club. It was like a veterans dinner or something like that. And he goes up and he tells this like full fake story. It's so great when he's up on the microphone and everyone's like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" But like, and then he points to all the people trying to get him, and then they clap, and then obviously he just runs out the back door, and then we cut to another scene. But that's just another one of those Chevy Chase improv scenes where he's just telling this. He stands up. He puts the Garrison hat on, and he's just doing this whole bullshit speech. It's so funny.
It's really quite entertaining. But logically, that's when it falls apart. When you have a room full of witnesses, like all of these things that have happened, like the cops saw him, like everybody knew it was him.
Oh yeah,
and then
it was the cops. My bad. Yeah.
It was the cops, and so yeah. But then, as he ducks out, he does this whole brilliant performance, and then he's just like, meet me, wow.
Yeah, he just
and it's over. It's over. He got away, everybody. It'll be fine. No legal repercussions.
Hey, man, he's Fletch.
He is Fletch. And also, there's no CCTV, no body cams. Nobody's got cell phones. You do have to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but I do like it.
Yeah, you have to have suspension of disbelief for a lot of suspension of disbelief for a lot of things in the Fletch movies, specifically two, specifically Who Lives. But it took a pulpy noir kind of comedic novel, but mostly just kind of straight laced with an interesting character, and turned it into a Chevy Chase vehicle in the mid '80s, which was perfect timing. So it was kind of like a great collaboration to like make Fletch a household name because he's so memorable. Whereas I think like if John Hamm was if that was the first Fletch movie ever made, it wouldn't be that memorable. Chevy Chase was such a major part of why I love Fletch and why I decided to read Fletch books. Knowing right away, when I went on that military tour and I started reading Fletch books, I'm like, Fletch is very different. He's very different, but there's still things in there that are the same. You know, he still has a very witty sense, and he has great comebacks, and he has the confidence. A lot of that stuff is the same, but Chevy Chase just brought something to it in this movie that made it a classic movie, you know?
Oh, I absolutely agree that it is the first Chevy Chase movie that I ever saw. It was the first time I fell in love with Chevy Chase. I saw this before I saw Vacation. I definitely had an experience watching it. It influenced not only my entertainment value, but also my sense of humor. I think that when people are like, oh, you know, when you're like Chevy Chase, you know, when you're like Ryan Reynolds, you know, when you're like Matthew Perry, it's like, oh, sarcasm. You're talking about sarcasm. And some people can do sarcasm with charm. And some people just come off as being sarcastic. And I think that Fletch is something that is, you can tell when he's being playful and you can tell when he's being sarcastic. And I fell in love with the character. And that's why I followed him through 3 of his movies.
Yeah.
And, you know, mileage will vary based on who plays the character.
Well said. I completely agree with that. That's super, super well said. Thank you very little. Its budget was $8 million, and its box office worldwide was $59 million, which is a huge success. If you look at its budget versus its box office, that's a big win, and it made it budget back opening weekend. 59 million for inflation. I don't know what that is, but it's over 100 something million. So that's great for like a comedy caper. You know, that's fantastic. I just I cannot remember the first time I watched it, which is weird because it's one of my favorite movies, but I know I didn't see it in the theater. I was too young. But I watched it probably on VHS. I saw Fletch Lives in the theater because I was really excited to see it. But yeah, I love this movie to death. It's a comedy classic. It's a Chevy Chase classic. It's a great representation of the character in the novel in a very different way to make it cinematic, which I think is necessary in order for the Fletch novels to really work, which is why I thought Kevin Smith and Jason Lee would have been a great addition to that because they would have made it the same kind of way.
I have it on DVD.
I have the DVD as well. I don't
There we
even know if
go.
it's on Blu-ray. Is it on Blu-ray? I don't even know.
I don't know. I got a double pack. It goes with Fletch Lives.
Universal Pictures presents Chevy Chase as Fletch.
My hero.
Nothing to it.
So it's 1989. The world had been clamoring for a sequel to Fletch. In the same year that we got Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2, Batman. Audience went in droves. Yes, audience.
Honey, what do you want to see? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade or Fletch Lives?
Ooh, I love that Chevy.
I'm not joking.
Fletch Lives was released in one of the most competitive summers in cinema history, and it did not earn its audience. However, what it didn't make in money, it made less in critical acclaim. Some calling the film offensive and a poor sequel. I don't have the facts to back this up, but let's throw it off to Siskel and Ebert.
Our first movie is Fletch Lives, a sequel to the 1985 comedy with Chevy Chase once again playing a Los Angeles newspaper reporter who sort of floats above the action, delivering sardonic wisecracks that sort of worked in the original film but doesn't work this time. One of the reasons is that Fletch Lives doesn't have a plot so much as a living, breathing museum of exhausted old movie cliches.
I watched this film for the first time on VHS, and maybe I had been tainted by the fact that I had already seen Funny Farm. This was Fletch at the Funny Farm.
You're all good.
I was enthralled by the animated dog and bird. I enjoyed the return of the Underhills, and I enjoyed most of the cast returning. Without Gina Davis this time, but I kind of understand why, because she was kind of upset at the end of the first Fletch that Fletch was taking Mrs. Stanwyck to Rio.
And
anyway.
She was becoming a star at that point, too. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. No, Gina Davis didn't necessarily need Fletch Lives.
I don't think this is a very good movie. I think 1989 is the year where you can, if you go back and you watch every single Chevy Chase movie, 89 is where he really started to show signs of not caring anymore. And it even shows in a beloved classic, Christmas Vacation, where a lot of that movie's shoulders rests on Cousin Eddie, Randy Quaid, with Chevy Chase more just sort of reacting to what's happening instead of being funny. I'm not saying he's not funny in it, but it sort of prepares us for what is to come of Chevy Chase. And this movie, more than a lot of Chevy Chase movies, you see the cracks in there. And for me, it's funny that you mentioned Funny Farm. The musical number in this looks like it belongs in a different movie. Maybe Funny Farm, maybe a vacation movie, but it doesn't work in Fletch. If you go to the original Fletch, if you go to any of the books, this movie's a joke. It's an absolute joke. Everybody was at the mercy of what Chevy Chase wanted to do, and they rolled with it, I'm guessing. Without the a bit by bit song at the beginning, the song they do give you is really weak and forgettable, and it prepares you for a very different movie that you're about to watch. A much sillier movie, unintentionally racist movie. Not to say there's not funny moments. There's a lot of funny moments, and I saw this in the theater because I couldn't wait to see it at the ripe young age of 11 or 12. I think it was 12. Yeah, it was 11, but I really wanted to see it. I do remember not liking it that much, even at that young age. It's still Chevy Chase being funny to an extent. At least they still have the Harold Faltermeyer score, thank God, and they still have the narration. I didn't really care for the plot of this movie. That kind of stuff just doesn't interest me, like these corrupt televangelists, that stuff. Just, I don't care about that stuff. So maybe a lot of it was like it's no longer in LA and it's in Louisiana. There's probably a lot about the setting that made me just not care for it as much. Fletch doesn't fit into that, even though other books take him in other places a lot. But for some reason, I just thought this movie was okay. I don't dislike it or hate it. It's fine.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up, in terms of the setting, which facilitates the plot, which is a corrupt, it is a land grab from a televangelist television station.
Yeah.
And someone wants to stop that from happening so that they are going to poison the land with toxic waste. And that is how much they hate the televangelists. But the televangelist is the subject of derision for most of the film. Yeah. And then at the end, we're supposed to, it's not them, even though they've been shown to be, duplicitous. But it's actually the guy who wants to get rid of them because his mom was duped out of all of the money that they still have. And I get how it starts. I get how it's okay, because you are Fletch, you are related to this woman who you didn't talk to for 16 years. Because you're an investigator find out what's going on here, because something is up. They want to buy my useless property. And it's never expressed. It's like, why did you give it to Fletch?
Right.
Why did you give it to Fletch, aside from Bloodline? And that's where what has happened to him is impacted by outside forces. He didn't want Belle Isle.
Yeah, but they're disregarding the novels, and they just made a whole new story for Chevy Chase's sake or whatever. But he has like an aunt who has like 80 acres or something, like a plantation, and they give it to him, and he just immediately quits his job at the newspaper, and then he has like dinner with somebody, and they offer him a bunch of like money or something for his place, and he doesn't really understand why. What was it, like $500,000 or $250,000 or something like that?
$250,000 for this rundown, dilapidated plantation house.
But the land is worth a lot, I guess.
Right.
Well,
and adjusted for inflation, it would be about $660 million or $660,000.
I was like, what the fuck? But then he wakes up the next day and Rose is dead, and he's charged. So there's a little bit of Confess Fletch in there, I guess. You know, he wakes up, someone's dead. He's going to get in trouble for it. His cellmate name?
Bend over.
Take your pants off.
I don't even know your name.
Bend over.
Ben, nice to meet you. Victor Hugo.
That's a little low-hanging fruit, but for the time, it was probably pretty funny. So he gets released on bail, and then, you know, then his investigative reporting instincts take form. He plays some funny returning characters, and you know, we forgot to even mention in Fletch the ball bearings guy, who's one of the funniest guys in the original Fletch. But he plays that guy again in this, and it's not as funny as it was the first time. Some of the characters that he dresses up for in this one just are so like childish. It's almost like they were maybe aiming for that, but I don't know. What do you think? But this movie has a KKK in it, so it couldn't have been made strictly for kids.
Well, I think it is a little bit more, it is leaning a little bit more into the comedy. And like you said, and I don't think it's an unfair assessment, is that Chevy Chase was probably being like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, let's do this. And I don't think he looks bored in it. But he is sort of still, like, he doesn't bring the same level of fear when he's confronted.
He doesn't feel bored. You're right. I just meant this is the first one where the cracks were starting to show. He doesn't.
Yeah.
It still feels like Fletch, but
he is given a blank check at the beginning of the film, and now he's not really getting out of any scrapes. He's just dealing with what is being thrown at him, and like I enjoy a proactive protagonist. Like, if you have a passive antagonist, it makes it less interesting. Even though he is trying to see what's going on, he only does it as a reaction to everything that occurs. I even think that some of the structure and the double cross and things that happen in this, I think it does sort of wrap up quickly at the end. You spend a lot of time making fun of the televangelists, and you are making fun of Southern culture.
A lot.
A lot. And yeah, I can see how it would be off-putting, but again, we're still dealing with an era when making fun of it was the best way to combat it, and that's even like Cleavon Little, the great Cleavon Little from Blazing Saddles and Vanishing Point.
Yeah, Calculus in this is like bordering on that stereotype, but obviously by the end it's not that, you know.
And that's the thing, when you watch it, Calculus, what's his last name, Rothstein or something?
I don't think you ever know. Do you ever know? I don't know.
No, his last name is, he does have a Jewish last name, and there is a joke made about that. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
And so he's an FBI agent. Like he masquerades throughout the film in this self-minstrel show that is very interesting to see Cleavon Little do, considering him being who he is in terms of Blazing Saddles. And Cleavon Little was amazing. I only know 3 of his movies, probably fewer. He reveals himself as being smarter and smarter throughout the film. And then even Fletch comments on it in one of the narrations and says, I don't think Cal is telling me everything he knows. But then it pays off as he was being secretive because he's an undercover cop.
Yeah.
How did he?
That was the best part as far as the mystery goes, is the whole second act. Fletch no longer trusts him because he knows he's hiding something. And that's where you're like, okay, this guy's more than just some fucking plantation hand or whatever. I do love, like you mentioned, he mentions the Underhills, which is fucking great.
Well, and here's the kicker, is he doesn't just mention the Underhills. They are in the movie.
Oh, did I miss
so
that?
In Zippity Doo-Dah, by the way, there is a Zippity Doo-Dah. There is a giant dance scene. And my theory on the giant dance scene is that it is supposed to be the sequelitis, bigger, more of the dream sequence. Because he does take a nap on the plane, and that's when we get Zippity Doo-Dah. I would like to point out, for a film that is sort of pointed out to be mildly racist, none of the people on the plantation are black. They are all Caucasians, except for the dog and the bird. And it depends on your, it looks like a sea of white people. I don't know all of their individual ethnicities, but I would like to point that out, because when you bring up plantation and you expect them to exploit, and they do sing Zippity Doo-Dah, you're like, oh, this is going to be bad. They're all honkies. But in that scene, the Underhills join the dance number.
Oh my God, I didn't even ever notice that. The same guy?
Both Mr. and Mrs. Underhill are played by the same actors.
Oh my God, I need to go back and look at that.
So through the course of the movie, it has been very apparent that people want to buy Belle Isle, Fletch's plantation. And he's not really ready to sell yet, because he's like, if they're offering me $250,000, they'll probably go up. It is discovered through Becky, played by Julianne Phillips, who I also found very attractive in this movie.
Hot. She's really hot.
Very attractive. And or feathered blondes even. They find out that no, the offer for the $250,000 has been rescinded. When Fletch goes back home, he finds his plantation engulfed in flame. So Cal,
they didn't care about the house.
Because they didn't care about the house. They just want to get rid of the land. And the thing is, with the land, it was going to be poisoned. And so after the engulfing in flame, Fletch and Cal go to a local diner, and some of the locals say, you know what? We heard about your house burning down, even though it happened as recently as half an hour ago.
Yeah, I know.
And then they say, have you ever been on a coon hunt? It's like, and then it's Cal. It's Cleavon Little who's like, you should do this. And it's like, really? I wouldn't know that you would be accepting of such vernacular. And then in the movie, Fletch says to Cal, it's like, are you coming with me? And he's like, I'm not running around in the woods in the dark with a bunch of white guys with guns. So the movie is self-aware.
You know, can I tell you an interesting fun fact? It's a total coincidence, Scotty, but so Ben Dover's lawyer's name is Hamilton Ham Johnson. So if you mix that around, you do get John Hamm.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, Ham is his nickname. Johnson is his last name. You take away the son, you put the John in front of Ham, you got John Hamm. What was it called? The Mega Church? The
what is it? The
Farnsworth Ministries.
Yes.
Jimmy Lee Farnsworth was Arlie Ermey, correct? Where
yes,
you kind of think Arlie Ermey's like behind everything because he's acting like it, and they're obviously from the direction and the writing, they're pointing that as kind of the guy. But so he discovers that his daughter is, you mentioned her, Becky Culpepper, but she's the pretty Farrah Fawcett-looking blonde girl.
Yes.
That there's the toxic waste is in the soil of Belle Isles.
They go to the toxic waste. He marches through the toxic waste, picks up some of it, goes back and hangs out. By the way, Cal has a shack So he sleeps in the shack with Cal. Cal has a waterbed, by the way.
I love
Also,
the waterbed. I love the waterbed.
He won it in a raffle. He wakes up the next morning, finds the toxic waste on his shoes, like the floorboards are smoking. And he actually sends them back to Frank in Los Angeles to get them analyzed, to find out what exactly is going on here. So there is some sleuthing, little bit.
You get a little bit of Frank in there too, yeah.
So then that's when it's like, well, why would the church doesn't want to buy the toxic waste? Now, when you talk about the megachurch, it is like a bond fortress. Like, or maybe the price is right.
$50. No, try again.
Well, that's a lot of those TV evangelists from the 80s and 90s, and where they're just like, oh, praise the Lord, and they're like putting their hands on your head and stuff.
Birds propel, eagles don't propel. We said, hooka, 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 hooka.
And, you know, when Chevy plays that evangelist guy, he looks funny, but all the jokes fell flat in those moments for me. Like, I was like, oh no, like it could have been so great.
I thought about it because I thought about Fletch Lives today. And my thought is that, yeah, he looks funny because he is known to every party at this point. He had to dress up, and that's why
way different. Yeah.
Yeah, but like even when he ends up being Harley Davidson, Ed Harley. It's the same thing. He's going too deep into the costumes, whereas before, like, they make a point of mentioning in the first Fletch that it's I splurged and spent 59 cents on a set of novelty teeth. And it's like in this one, it's like I was completely redone like Jacques Cousteau in later era Pink Panther movies.
Everybody in town knows who he's like a celebrity, basically, because everybody knows who he is. So,
well, he's got Belial.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, like, the most like crazy disguise, like you almost still have to suspend disbelief that they don't realize that that's him. But when he plays this guy, he does look pretty good, you know.
No, but I agree with you. I thought it was a little bit too. Like, the reason that he did all of that was so that he could get in and use the computer and get the information, and so it was on purpose, but the fact that he was doing it in such a getup was, like, head-scratching. And then, when he does, and it's the way he weaseled himself into this particular Chuck E. Cheese, is by saying that he was going to be a guest healer, and then he has to make good on being the guest healer.
Yeah, and I wanted that scene to be so funny because it was all set up to be funny, and it just wasn't really that funny. But
and at the end, he actually hurts the guy.
Yeah, well, he's just trying to leave too the whole time. He's like, I don't want to be. I would have loved it more if Chevy was like, he went in full on this character and just made this whole spectacle moment out of it. But Fletch gets proof that Ham Johnson, quote unquote John Ham, was the one that ordered like the dump. So Randall Tex Cobb's lawyer is the one that ordered the dump on Bell Island or whatever. Yes. And you know, Fletch goes up to him and with the evidence at that costume party scene. Oh yeah,
I want to mention
Al Holbrook is in this movie and he's great.
Yes, he is great. He's good in this. I think he's great.
Great cast. I don't hold anything about the cast of this movie. I just find it's just a huge, like, in the pantheon of giant downgrades from the first movie to its sequel, this is one of those ones that's just nowhere near as good as the first one.
I would put it on the same category, and oddly enough, in the same year that Ghostbusters 2 was released, I would say I have the same regard for Fletch Lives as I do for Ghostbusters 2.
There you go.
But every time I revisit Ghostbusters 2 or Fletch Lives, I'm like, maybe I'm being too hard on it, and it rises just a little bit more. But I still like the original better.
You know, Fletch Lives, I know critically it was panned, and a lot of fans like myself were disappointed. But again, Scotty, same exact budget, $8 million, same director. It made $39 million worldwide instead of like 69 million or whatever we said for the last one, but that's not bad. It's still did okay for back then. Back then, marketing didn't cost as much, because it wasn't so widespread everywhere.
Well, and especially considering the year, like for it to be a modest hit.
Yeah, it was still a modest hit because remember, your sequel is only as good as the one that came before it, and the one that came before it is what's going to send people to see the sequel. But then, yeah, obviously it got stuck in its tracks because it wasn't as good as the sequel, and everybody knew it. But
well, and that's the thing. And when we are talking about our Fletch retrospective, there we do have to say goodbye to Chevy Chase, and this is again, I have a reverence for the man. I enjoy Clark Griswold. I enjoy Ty Webb. I enjoy Irwin M. Fletcher. I like watching Bugs Bunny.
Ty Webb is probably the closest to Fletch out of all Chevy's characters, where he's suave and, he's like there's a feeling there where it seems like he's very similar. But other than that, but I agree with you. This is where we say goodbye to Chevy Chase, unfortunately. But, he gave us 2 movies in 5 years. And, say what you want about either. First one's a masterpiece. Second one's fine. And then we take this giant, long hiatus. Greg Matala, the director of Superbad, comes back in 2022 to direct Confess Fletch, the third Fletch film in 40-something years, I think, or 40 years, or close to 40 years. And he brings with him John Hamm. And with John Hamm, you get the best adaptation from page to screen as far as changes, as far as the story, and as far as the tone of the books. I think John Hamm, very underrated as Fletch, did a fantastic job. Unfortunately, because the movie went more faithful to the books, it kind of makes the film seem aimless. I still enjoyed it. I had fun watching it because I'm a fan of the book. But there's something about it that doesn't go far enough into comedy and doesn't go far enough into caper noir to really hit home. It's a well-made movie. It just doesn't really have much of a voice.
I agree that it is more faithful to what I remember when I read the original Fletch in terms of how things were going to go. This seemed drier. And I do think that John Hamm is a little too goofy for the proceedings. He is trying to bring the comedy, and I appreciate his comedic timing. I'm not saying he's wrong. I think that it pops when it pops, especially considering the cast of this film. I think that he is paired with people where Fletch's manipulative sarcasm or condescending nature does come through, but the edges are dulled.
That's what I've been trying to materialize in my own brain about Fletch books put into movies without Chevy Chase. Is will they work on screen? And as much as I love this movie as an adaptation to that book, I don't think it works on screen. I really don't. Even though they cut corners to make it more cinematic, I love John Hamm. I think he did a really good job with Fletch's mannerisms, facial expressions, jokes. But the jokes fall under the radar. There's like I was hearing them and I was laughing, but they happen so quickly sometimes because they do give him that dry wit, sense of humor. There's little Chevy Chase moments in his performance, but they're done differently. They're not showcased, so you could almost like blink and miss some of his dialogue and some of his quibs. So I think John Hamm was great, fantastic as I Am Fletch. I think he was great, or I Am Fletcher. I think he was fantastic. I really think he nailed it because he obviously looked at the books more than the Chevy Chase movies, which he should, because I think that's what they were going for. The only problem is like Confess Fletch is kind of a smaller scale story compared to some of the funner Fletch books. So the story itself may not be compelling to somebody that doesn't know much about Fletch or the books or the Chevy Chase thing, or the Chevy Chase movies. So it comes across sort of stale in the sense that like they don't go full comedy, they don't go full serious noir, so it's kind of somewhere stuck in the middle. And though I love that those kind of movies are still being made and those movies still exist, I personally, I can see why it bombed, and I can see why no one knew it existed. It's sort of a movie without a home or a place in this day and age, a product of a different era, maybe, a type of film that I love, Scotty, but it's not gonna. It wasn't gonna break through. You know, it's hard to describe it. You know what I mean?
When it comes to the marketing of this film, they didn't know how to do it really. It's
What
almost well, and there is that. Like, and this was released originally on Amazon. I think that there was a limited. This was 2022, so there was still fallout in movie theater availability. It was released to Amazon with very little fanfare. I know that there was some promotion, but I think the most prominent internet promotion that I saw about Fletch was your usual street level internet movie reviewers saying, how can you do Fletch without Chevy Chase? When John Hamm was somewhere, I remember seeing him on the Rich Eisen show, I think. And he was saying, this isn't Chevy Chase, this isn't Funny Teeth, this isn't Disguises. And I was like, good.
We're not trying to do the Chevy Chase impression.
You could say though that Chevy Chase, because I've read the Fletch books.
Yes,
that's not the Fletch books. Those are not the Chevy Chase.
The Chevy version is very Chevy heavy, as we might say.
I wouldn't want to see that in 2022, but I think that a lot of people took it as, how can you replace Chevy Chase, which is something that I'm very familiar to when it comes to being a James Bond fan, and I just took it as, okay, this is going to be a new interpretation. And the best way that I can say, John Hamm stepping into the shoes of Chevy Chase, John Hamm is very Roger Moore. He's very handsome, he's very charming, but he's not a dick. And he's tall. Well, but also, like, one of the things that I enjoyed about the first two Fletch movies is that Fletch got to be a dick to people. Like, the lawyer, like Gillette, played by the Weiner fella, George Weiner, not in this. And as from what I understand in terms of the chronology of the books, the reason, because this is the second book, the reason that Fletch is in Europe is because he just got the Stanwyck money.
And he's no longer an investigative reporter. He's like he traveled. This is where the books sort of move, where he starts to travel for money and stuff like that. So he was like he was an investigative journalist, and now he's just like a freelance writer, and people use him for certain things or whatever. He still carries like a lot of the Chevy Chase humor and wit. Are you hungry? No, I ate yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, oh, my dog, I'm sorry, my dog pees when he's hungry. Oh, I do the same thing. Like, there's still the humor there, the story of Confess Fletch is one of the more like convoluted stories of all the books.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is. Fletch is hired by a billionaire in Italy to like investigate the whereabouts of some missing art. And one of the biggest deviations from the book is that when he goes back to Boston, he house swaps with the person that owns the house in Boston. And that person goes to Italy. So he gets there and there's a dead body. I love how he's just so nonchalant when he calls the police. And they're like, you're the number one suspect. He's like, why? Like, I just called you guys. Like, he plays it off. It does feel Chevy a little bit. It does feel very carefree. But it also feels like Fletch from the books. Like I think John Hamm knocked it out of the park.
Well, and I think that in terms of the structure, in terms of not being able to really latch onto the story right away, we don't know. Like, we do know that the billionaire hired Fletch, but then, like, within the first 10 minutes of the movie, the billionaire is apparently kidnapped. And now it becomes a scavenger hunt for paintings. He doesn't want money. The kidnapper.
The kidnappers want certain paintings, yeah.
Right. And so then you have to, like, I'm not that well versed in my, art
Me neither.
literature. So when they start,
I've heard of picante.
It's very picante.
Picante sauce is made in San Antonio.
This stuff's made in New York City.
New York City!
Get a rope.
Pick up the original.
And that's the thing, is that there is a certain level of expertise expected of the audience, and I like it when a piece of work doesn't talk down to me. But and you're listing Renaissance painters, and maybe not even Renaissance painters, zippity-doo-dah.
Artistes.
But that's where it's like, oh, this is very important. It does get very Italian. Also, I would like to say, in contrast to Fletch Lives, where there are questionable undertones of maybe racial divides, we got a lot of people who are playing Italians. There are a lot of Italians.
I knew you were gonna say that, man.
Marcia Gay Harden.
She is the most stereotypical, awful Italian accent I've ever heard, dude. It's terrible, man.
Which is fine.
Spaghetti. The Fletch. It's nice to see you.
I am not going to have any of your American double talk. I want truth. Where are my paintings?
Well, I love her so much as an actress, but man, her as the Countess, it just didn't work for me at all. It didn't work.
Well, and the thing is that I don't even know if any of it is an act. Based on the response from the rest of the characters, maybe she's making up she's Italian in the first place.
Right, but it's not. Yeah, it's not.
No, but I don't know.
Funniest character in the book, funniest character in the movie. It's the neighbor, Eve, who's the neighbor of the Boston place. And in the book, her name is like Joan, I think, or something like that, but who cares? It's the same thing. But holy shit, like the scene in the kitchen with Eve is the funniest part. That's where you're like, wow, this is a Fletch movie right here. It is so funny.
Yes.
And John Hamm's like reactions to everything is so great. And she's just like adding oil to this thing on the stove, and it's just lighting up a fire. And he's using all his wit, where he's like, "Yep, it's on fire, all right." Like, it's so great.
But you're right. Like,
a big character in the book as well. Another suspect,
Annie Mamalo.
Yeah, and I've seen her in so many things. She's
Wasn't she on The Sopranos?
I think so. Yeah.
Grizz, and then we get by Aidan Mayeri and Roy Wood Jr. playing Monroe, Slow Mo Monroe. Cast in this is amazing. Kyle MacLachlan shows up for the love of Pete.
Yeah, well, Kyle MacLachlan is basically your quote-unquote villain suspect, like major suspect.
He's your Alan Stanwyck, who's not married.
He's your Stanwyck for sure. And again, this movie, as well as the original Fletch movie, ends very differently than the book, where it all kind of accumulates together, where everything is kind of figured out in one spot, where all these characters from the movie show up at the exact same place at the exact same time. That doesn't happen in the book. It's all like, well, we figure this out, and then we go to this place, and we figure this out. Marcia Gay Harden plays the Countess, and she's like Angela's like stepmother. The guy that's kidnapped, the man that's kidnapped, again, different from the book. He's kidnapped, and they're like, well, we're offering we want a bunch of money, and they're like, well, we don't have the money. We only have the paintings. In the book, the people holding them ransom just want the paintings. So there's a little bit of difference there, but the movie does a better job. The book is very confusing, even though I think the ending is bad, really bad, and it's nothing like the book. Like, it makes Fletch look like some sort of Robin Hood, where he's giving paintings to everybody that he met throughout. That does not happen.
No, but also the thing is, and the punchline to that, because it does seem out of place. And again, Fletch isn't a dick in this movie. Like, the only person he's a dick to really would be Horan, would be Kyle MacLachlan's character. And everyone else, he's just sort of dodging and charming. But at the end, the painting that he keeps is the one that is, like, it's the $20 million one.
Yep, I do love the ending shot too. Yeah, but
you're right. When he is Robin Hood, he is giving away a bunch of paintings. He even gives away a check to the guy who pulled a gun on him. Again, it's a whodunit, it's a why did this happen kind of movie, so it is, while not wanting to spoil the jokes, also not wanting to spoil the mystery, even though the resolution of the mystery in all three of these movies really isn't the point.
It's
so
not.
maybe I should stop clutching my pearls.
Well, this one really takes that to the next level by the end, and I gotta say, I don't like, what's his name, Roy Wood Jr. that plays the Inspector Morris Monroe is not, okay, so his partner, who they put way too much emphasis on in this movie, is not in the book. The female, the goofy.
Yeah, but she's Larry.
I didn't think her jokes landed though, man. Like,
I love Grizz.
So she's not in the book, and his character, Inspector Morris Monroe, actually, McDonald wrote a spinoff on that character, and I love the way they show him in this movie with the baby, and like it's fucking great. It's really funny stuff. The sidekick character is not in any way, shape, or form like part of the books, and I just didn't find it funny. Okay.
I found Aiden.
She was definitely cute.
She was cute, and I liked the interaction. And the reason that I liked the interaction is because while it was kind of like a more prickly Larry, is because like she said that she didn't like him at all, but the one moment when they pick up and they don't arrest him, but they pick him up from his car. He's outside of what's his name, Horan's art gallery, and they pick him up. They bring him back to the police station. He had been in his car listening to podcasts about pigs, or a podcast about pigs, which is when the cop shows up, which is hilarious. And then they go back and they're like, Grizz, have you heard how long a pig can orgasm? The scene plays out, exposition, and they close out the scene with Grizz losing it and going like, oh my god, pigs come for an incredibly long time.
Yeah, and I do like the editing in some of those scenes, because it cuts right when she says that, and that's a good place to cut, because that's a moment of like comedy. I agree. There was little hints that like Grizz and Fletch had this like chemistry together, like a love-hate chemistry, and then like I said, I have a lot of problems with the ending, and like, he's like, hey, we did it, and she's like, you didn't do anything, you have white privilege. I was like, oh my fucking god.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
No, that's just Grizz. Grizz is a bitch.
But are we really doing that in a Fletch movie?
It was 2022, dude.
I know, but it just doesn't belong in a Fletch story. That's so lame.
No, but this is the thing, and I only push back against this because I think that it is representative of when this Fletch exists, and I point this back to the filmmaking, is that the reason that we don't have any narration going on in Confess Fletch is because we don't need it, because everyone is in constant communication anyway. So if you wanted to hear what Andy was saying, we get to listen to a voicemail.
Okay, so before we move on, I just want to say this. This is the first Fletch that cost more than $8 million. It cost $20 million, but, in 2022 money, that's probably $8 million. The problem is, worldwide, Scotty, it grossed $656,000. And that has a lot to do with the fact that it didn't really, I don't think it got a theatrical release outside of like maybe some limited stuff, LA, New York, maybe, I don't know. There was no return on investment for a $20 million budget earning $656,000. But yeah,
which I find absolutely insane based on the director Greg Matala, the star power of John Hamm, which I believe in. There's an old quote of Kevin Smith saying that he loves Ben Affleck so much that if you were to remake Jaws, that Ben Affleck could play the shark. And I say that about John Hamm. So that's like, I am a fan. He is my Burt Reynolds older generation. He is my Zac Efron younger generation. And so I don't know, man. I supported this movie. I was excited for it.
Yes, you did. Much more than I did, and I'm sorry to say
I am a Mad Men fan. When I knew I was going to get Hamm and Slattery together again, I was in. I purchased it on opening weekend on Amazon. It was $30 Canadian. And then when it came out on Blu-ray, it was $35. So I have contributed whatever hundreds of thousands they made. I contributed at least $65. Plus all applicable tariffs and taxes.
You definitely were somebody that was on top of this movie and wanted it to succeed. And yeah, you definitely...
And it didn't.
If you want to make a Fletch movie right now in this day and age, do Fletch 1. Do Fletch 1. Get a young guy. Yes. Fletch 1 is a great book. It'll if you put it in modern times, people will get it and they'll watch it. You know, because it's a young Erwin Fletcher. You can modernize it as long as you keep the tone and all that stuff. It could work.
But I do feel that Confess Fletch is very modern. I do feel that it does address cultural things. It does, but it doesn't do it in a way that is heavy-handed. It's just matter of fact, and it does come with an eye roll.
I definitely agree with the eye roll because, like, a former investigative journalist in 2022 who now writes puff pieces on art, and he's involved in a big art dealer theft scheme. That's not exactly modern. That's like Hudson Hawk shit.
From what I understand, Andy is asked, because at the end of the film, we discover that there is an actual long-lasting friendship, or at least recent friendship and trust, between Fletch and Manty. Manty played by Robert Picardo from Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
He also played the rabbi in Hail Caesar. He may have been in Star Trek.
He was also awesome as the cowboy in Inner Space.
Yeah, no, but I love Robert Picardo, obviously the Doctor from Star Trek Voyager. And he shows up, and apparently the kidnapping was arranged by Fletch.
Yes, it was.
To ensnare Andy into stealing the paintings. Andy shipped the paintings to Kyle MacLachlan to try and do something.
So the Count, who faked his own kidnapping working with Fletch, was really just trying to, like, find out if his wife and daughter were loyal. I just don't think this was the movie to bring Fletch back. I don't think this was the one, because people are gonna, like, look at the plot and be like, you know. But John Hamm does his best to, like, make it super entertaining, and he does have those great lines.
I think that when they do interject their those little lines, I think that they are character driven, and I think that Fletch responds to them like, "All right, calm down."
No, you're right. But like
even Fletch drops a Me Too reference.
Yeah, he does.
And he's like, "Hey Frank, how about I tell your wife?"
It feels like a Fletch book. John Hamm is Fletch from the books. But again, the reason I bring that up as like a negative, it's because I think the reason that Chevy Chase did what he did in those movies and made Fletch like a household name was because they took what was in those and they changed it. Because if you for me, the perfect Fletch movie, especially right now, I know he doesn't act anymore. He's left acting. But if Jason Lee was in Fletch's Fortune and he just played Jason Lee from any, you name it, any Kevin Smith movie where he's just so great, and he was just at his college reunion and there's a murder that takes place, and like he would crush that. He would crush that. I'm glad that Confess Fletch is a movie. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it got made. I think John Hamm was awesome. It's just there's something off about it. There's just something that's not quite what I wanted from it. I don't know what it is, Scotty, but
well, if there were two things that I would say.
Yeah.
The first is that I agree that Confess Fletch is not something that you can bring to a contemporary audience in the same way that if you were trying to remake Ocean's 11, like the original with Frank Sinatra, and then you had the same cast who you love from the remake, like George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, et al., and you instead decided to reintroduce the world by making Ocean's 12. And that's like we're still calling it Ocean. No, we would call it Ocean's 12, but to set it in Europe initially kind of loses the audience.
Yes.
I think that there's a little Ocean's 12 in here. The second thing,
you're right. It has to be in Vegas, otherwise, like, the masses won't watch it. Yeah. Honestly, if they really want to see if they can make something out of this franchise, start chronologically, not from book order, but start with him. Like, honestly, dude, like a Tarantino would crush a Fletch book, like crush
the
it.
10th film by Quentin Tarantino.
Like the way he did like Rum Punch and turned it into Jackie Brown, he could definitely do that. He won't, but I'm just saying, like, Fletch 1 is when he is in LA and he's a young reporter, and he's naive, he's not quite as quibby yet, and from there you can move on to the Widow Bradley or whatever, and you can still have a young Fletch, maybe like a Glenn Powell or something. Like he's a little bit,
Glenn,
he's like early 30s. He could still be a young Fletch, but
that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea.
What you can do and make the movie could make money. Confess Fletch was never going to make money because it didn't spark anything to anybody unless you were a Gregory McDonald fan, or like you and I, like a fan of Fletch in general.
Or a John Hamm fan.
That's why I got $600,000 at the box office, because no one knew what the fuck it was and no one cared what it was. You have to make people care, and it's like, how about you maybe even change the name, not Fletch 1. You change the name to whatever the story is of the movie. It's based on the book Fletch 1.
But it's still I like where your head's at. Like,
I digress.
It's a problem solving situation, and the thing is, and I agree. Like, I wanted, based on the end of that movie, Confess Fletch, with there still being some sort of a relationship, no matter how thorny. Like, the relationship between Frank and Fletch still existed, and he was dumped by Andy. He still had Robert Picardo as his friend. You could have, like, a sequel that would follow up, and if you wanted to interject different characters based on where Fletch was in the world, like, it would work-ish. It would almost be James Bondian. But, American and cool.
They would have to be made for less than $20 million, and honestly, I don't know why Confess Fletch cost $20 million.
I think it had a lot to do with location shooting.
Probably, yeah.
For my review for Confess Fletch, 5 stars.
Out of 10?
No. The same I would give to a Lyft or an Uber.
Yeah. I can't go that high, because, like, as much as I respect it for feeling so Fletch as a book, it did what I always thought it might do, is, like, if you stay too close to that book, it's not cinematic very much. It just doesn't. My points, Scotty, my points are going to be because John Hamm nails the book character of Fletch. Absolutely crushes it. It's everything that Fletch is supposed to be. Like, he's funny, but he's not hokey. It's like, I think they shouldn't have made this. They shouldn't have made it on this book. It's just it's too late in Fletch's life. First of all, it's like, if you're gonna do another Fletch movie, like, start from the beginning, maybe. I don't know, but Confess Fletch is when he's not even he's not even an investigative reporter anymore. He's just like a freelancer. I want to give this movie, out of 10 gulps, 6.5. 6.5 out of 10. Because the acting's superb. The tone is there. It's just not a compelling film. Is that okay?
I disagree. I think it's driven by performance, and I think the writing is on par with Fletch. I agree it sort of falls apart and makes Fletch into a bit of a bumble.
For me, it's like a movie that I really enjoyed, but I wouldn't call it one of my favorite movies of the year. So,
the only reason I'm giving it 5 stars is because that's what John Hamm gives to every Uber and Lyft. And so even if we're gonna rate all the other movies, Fletch Lives, 5 stars. Fletch, 5 stars. I love this trilogy. I don't care the discrepancies.
1985 Fletch is an absolute 11.
Put it up to
11, exactly.
Fletch Lives, I think, is like a 5 out of 10. But I gotta say, John Hamm wins as far as like the actual Fletch on camera for the first time. Like John Hamm is Fletch. He's fantastic, you know.
But
so.
Chevy Chase is my Sean Connery of Fletch.
Yeah, well, Chevy Chase is what made me get interested in Fletch, you know. But once you read the books and then you watch this newer movie, you're like, wow, that's the Fletch from the page, you know.
Nice.
So I wanted to give a little eulogy for Gregory McDonald. Watching this movie and not knowing who directed it or cared, who wrote it, who cared. I didn't even know it was from a book back when I was a little kid. Finding out who wrote it and realizing there were so many Fletch books. And to be honest with you, there's more than a lot of people know. Like in the 90s, before he got older and sick, he did Son of Fletch, Fletch Reflected. I've heard of Son of Fletch and I kind of want to read it, but I haven't done it yet. I just want to give, you know, a little RIP to Gregory McDonald, who passed away in 2008 at the age of 71. He was a masterful storyteller and author, and I love that he made so many Fletch books for us to enjoy. And I love it that people found those books good enough to make films out of them, and hopefully we'll see some more.
Well, and to further that, interesting because we've been waiting so long to sort of check out Fletch cinematic universe, that there are so many more Fletch stories out there that I haven't even encountered. Maybe it's time for me to revisit the McDonald oeuvre. I like stories about characters. I know that I was too young to read Fletch when I got it the first time. As you said, it gets better. So even if I just go back in to reacquaint myself and get into the tone of the books, like, it'll be fun. That's what happened when I watched Bond. And as I said, Fletch is more American and cooler than James Bond.
Thanks everybody for watching. Check out the Fletch movies if you haven't seen them already. We spoiled the shit out of them, but Scotty, thank you for offering this one up as like an idea for us to do a show. I appreciate it, and I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Well, thank heavens that you finally put out.
All right, Dr. Rosen.
Charge it to the Underhills.
Charge it to the Underhills. We drink your cinema.
I drink it up!